Welcome to Protagonist Pub. My name is Tammy, and this is where characters gather. I hope you all had a fantastic weekend. We had a very nice, relaxing, quiet, peaceful weekend, and I got a lot of reading done. I actually got Dave to relax and unwind, which was very necessary, and hopefully his coworkers appreciate it when he goes, when they show up to the office today. So it was a great weekend here. I hope everybody else had a truly comparable weekend on their end. And we have things to talk about today. I feel for like the first time all month, I have something to quote unquote show for all the reading I've done. So let's first talk about Cymbeline, which I did finish last week and I talked about briefly, but I told y'all I needed it to sit and I needed to read the Harold Bloom chapter on the play. And I have done that. It has sat. I now know where I land with it. So in both my Royal Shakespeare Compendium, which is on the shelf behind me, and the Folger copy of the play, it is classified as one of Shakespeare's tragedies. Bloom, on the other hand, in his wonderful work that only discusses, let me verify this because my brain could be, caffeine deprived. Nope. Which only discusses Shakespeare's plays. So the sonnets are not covered. Is Shakespeare, The Invention of the Human by Harold Bloom. It's a nice, big, thick, chunky book. There's a chapter attached to every play. And Bloom is one of the recognized scholars on Shakespeare. And he also has books on, let's see, The Politics of Influence, American Religion, The Ringers in the Tower, Studies in Romantic Tradition, Yeats, Blake's Apocalypse, Shelley's Myth-Making. So he has a wide breadth of books, and he was I'm not sure if he's still alive, the Sterling Professor of Humanities at Yale, the Berg Professor of English at New York University, and a former Charles Eliot Norton Professor at Harvard. So he's not just some nobody off the street. And Bloom classifies Cymbeline not as a tragedy, but as a late romance written by Shakespeare. And he lists 6 plays as a late romance written by Shakespeare that I don't think is the general classification for those plays. So in addition to Cymbeline, they are Pericles, The Winter's Tale, The Tempest, Henry VIII, and Two Noble Kinsmen. And when I finished Cymbeline, I understood the play. That wasn't the problem. It, once again, is a Shakespearean tale of a king who makes poor choices and gets his just due at the end of the play. Cymbeline is the king, and brief synopsis, he has 3 children. Imogen is his daughter. He has 2 infant sons whose names just flew out of my head. The two infant sons are kidnapped when they are 2 and 3. They are kidnapped by one of his advisors. The king believes they're dead. Imogen believes they're dead. And you don't meet them until, I want to say, the middle of the play. And he remarries. He has another son. And thus sets up the family melodrama that is Cymbeline, that unfortunately involves the entire kingdom, as you would imagine, and Rome. And it's a very odd play. It reads like Shakespeare, but it is very self-deprecating. And I think a lot of my initial gut reaction was Shakespeare is poking fun at himself. And was very, I don't want to say satirical or sarcastic, but in that vein about the act of writing a play. You could see hints of it throughout. And I didn't dislike the play. It was difficult to categorize. So I picked up my handy dandy Bloom, and the very first thing I tabbed The very first thing I tabbed was this sentence in particular. Part of the fascination of Cymbeline is the reader's and playgoer's sense that something is wayward about this drama. It will not abide a steady contemplation. One cannot even be certain that it behaves like a play. The plot is a chaos, and Shakespeare never bothers to be probable. Nor can we say how Imogen found herself in the world of villains who exist on a different level of representation from her mimetic realism. And that aptly encapsulates how I felt. Imogen is our heroine, and she goes from being, a good wife, the daughter of the king, and all of a sudden she is the object of a bet. Her stepbrother is desirous to marry her. She loves her husband, however, and suddenly her husband loses the bet and he accuses her of adultery, and she has to escape, and the evil stepmother trope is in there, and it's just a very convoluted opening, and then suddenly she's amongst villains, and I really think Shakespeare was just poking fun at playgoers and at readers and at the entire theatrical community at this point in his career. I think he was tired of writing. I think he just wanted to retire and stop, and yet he couldn't. And this play was an attempt to exit that didn't succeed. So, am I sad I read it? No, I'm not, because it reads much differently than anything else I have read by the Bard. And I love this quote from Bloom. Everything about Cymbeline is madly problematic. As Shakespeare, in a willful mood, evidently intended. The villains are comic. Imogene's husband is a husbandly dolt, and Cymbeline is thick-headed enough to deserve his tiresomely wicked queen. Imogen ought to be in a play worthier of her aesthetic dignity, but Shakespeare seems too troubled to give her the context she deserves. And I think that perfectly sums up my gut reaction to the play and the give and pull that was going on in it. And he just didn't know what he wanted to do. Or he did what he wanted to do, and he intentionally left people scratching their head, trying to not just categorize it, but make sense of choices he made. So that's how I felt about Cymbeline. Okay, next up, I have finished a Dave book. That is London by Edward Rutherford. It is phenomenal. So, it is historical fiction. It tells the story. The city of London is absolutely the main character of this book. Yes, there are human people. Yes, you follow ancestral lines from the beginning of the book through to the end. Is it a straight, family tree line? No, it's not. But that's okay. It goes from the prehistory of the city of London to the year before the book was published, so 1997. And the opening and concluding chapters have the same title, which is The River, because obviously the Thames plays a pivotal role in the history of the city of London. And it's my second Rutherford book of the year. It is a comprehensive, without being a history book, overview of British history. We have Celts, we have Romans, we have the rise of Cromwell, the Restoration, the Great Fire, Henry VIII and his influence. And you don't see it through the eyes of the top echelon of society. You see it from the viewpoint of the common, for lack of a better description, middle class, families. And you see how London changes and grows, and the ancient history of places that would be very familiar to a modern reader. It is a phenomenally written book, and you can easily read a chapter, which I think the longest chapter is like 100 pages, but it tells a story for that time frame. And you could read a chapter and put it down and come back to it in a month, or read a couple of chapters and come back to it in a couple of months, and you wouldn't have lost anything. There's no cliffhanger stuff at the end of one chapter that leads you into the next. Instead, what you get is these stories that tell the history of the time and place through the lens of everyday people. They may or may not interact with the upper echelons of society, but you're not getting history from the point of view of, let's say, William the Conqueror or Oliver Cromwell. Instead, you're getting history through the eyes of a stonemason or a grasping noble or an engineer for, the sewer system in London. And it was so enjoyable. It took me a long time, I admit, and I am okay with that. You know how there are some books that, this was 829 pages, have a high page count, but you can read them very quickly. The text isn't dense and its content isn't something you need to digest, so you can just, breeze through it. This is not that. This is content that is dense, but not in a bad sense, in a sense that it conveys a lot of information without it being textbook in nature. And it is very well researched. At no point did I, set the book down and go, you got that detail wrong, or I need to go look this up to verify that it's right. At no point did my brain revert back to its, history student and go, oh, wrong. Go fix it before you, put the facts back in your head wrong. It's just a good story in which the city is the primary character, and you watch it go from the River Thames to the burgeoning metropolis it is today. And you watch that growth through time. It was fascinating. I can easily recommend Rutherford. I am going to read The Forest next year. And I'm going to take my time and, read a little bit here and read a little bit there. There's no great rush on my part next year. And I'm just going to enjoy it. And The Forest is the forest that sits right outside of Bath in England, where so much of, literature for Regency is set. So it's perfect. Okay. Then what did I read? Well, then I finished. Okay. Next up, we are going to talk about Jane Austen's Genius Guide to Life by Haley Stewart. I read the appropriate chapter for Northanger Abbey last Monday, and it was, I don't want to say it changed my overall gut reaction to the book, because it did not, but am I a little bit more sympathetic to Catherine Morland? Yes. The title of the chapter is Catherine Learns to Read the World. And this was a brilliant read for me, who I am not an inherent Jane Austen fan. And next time I pick up a Jane Austen book, I'm going to read this chapter first that corresponds with it, and I want to read you something. As with Elizabeth and Emma, humility is the key to Catherine's growth. She respects Henry, who is willing to tell her the truth, and she accepts that she has much to learn. Unlike John and Isabella Thorpe, she will not deceive herself into believing she knows more than she does. Instead, she will gain clearer lenses through which to view the world. That was the missing analysis my brain didn't come up with, that young Catherine, who I still think is a vapid, shallow-headed, insipid airhead, needed a wingman like Henry to balance her out. And the fact that Henry never tells her she's insipid, but rather gives her another way to view the world, was something I missed. Now, does it change my overall gut reaction to Catherine? No, it does not. It does not in the slightest. Does it give me a new perspective on the entire novel? It does. Will I maybe someday possibly reread Northanger Abbey? It's possible. Not likely, but it is possible. I will not say it's not possible. It's not likely, but it is possible. So, if you struggle with a Jane Austen book, or you are looking for a brief insight into each of her completed works, I can highly recommend this book by Haley Stewart. The chapters aren't long, but they are incredibly insightful, and I appreciated that. Okay, now let's talk about The Blazing World by Margaret Cavendish. I have not finished this. And the reason I have not finished this is I did some digging on the life of the Duchess of, oh my gosh, Cavendish? No. Newcastle. Duchess of Newcastle. And I stumbled across a wonderful podcast. I will link it down below. It is called The Stuff You Failed to Learn in History Class. I believe that's the right name. It's linked in the description box below. And they had an entire episode about the Duchess of Newcastle, and they touched on her work, The Blazing World, and it turns out that this is the second half of her accompanying philosophical discussion, which was the much more important thing to her. And this makes sense in connection with that work. Now, can I get a copy of that work in paperback form, hardback form? No. Am I in the process of tracking it down? I am, because I am interested enough in this wonderful piece of science fiction fantasy that I want to know more. But I need this to read as she intended it, not on its own, which is not what she intended by any means. I also just want to make a little caveat here. I picked this up off of Amazon last year. It was part of my birthday haul. And I didn't do a lot of research. I read that it was considered the first science fiction work, and it was published in 1666, and that was enough for me. However, it is published by an independent publisher. Obviously, it's well out of copyright, and the bind-up is not great. I have pages that are completely unglued, and I will never again buy an independently published classical work because there is no quality control and there is no mention that this is the second half of a greater work. So I will pick this up again when I find its accompanying philosophical work. If you are interested in Margaret Cavendish and her incredibly interesting life, the podcast episode is linked down below, and it is well worth, I think it's like 20 minutes, a listen. Okay, that clears up that backlog. I Am Margaret by Corinna Turner. This was a Kindle purchase for me. It is the first in the I Am Margaret series. This is Catholic fiction. It is also young adult, dystopian, sci-fi, and I am not, by any stretch of the imagination, a young adult reader. I think this may be my very first dystopian novel. So it is well outside of my general reading comfort zone. And this tells the story of our heroine, Margaret, who is a citizen of the Euro bloc. It is set on Earth, and something has happened, and I'm pretty sure it's an environmental disaster, and population is much less, and the Euro bloc is a piece of work. All religion is outlawed. It is a death sentence if you are caught. Does not matter the faith. If you do not issue a divine denial, it is a death sentence. And parents can only have 2 kids, and they must be registered with the government. And when they turn 16, they have to pass an exam to be considered adults and worthy of admission into society. And Margaret and her boyfriend, Bane, are 16, and they take the test. They go back to school to find out the results, which are announced publicly at school. And if you pass, you are isolated from the rest of the students and your parents. And if you don't pass, you cease to exist for society. You are sent to a reclamation facility. You are a reassignee, and basically the government is going to spend the next 2 years getting you in peak condition, unless they need you ahead of time, before they reclaim you. Okay, that sets up the book. Margaret is Catholic. She is baptized. Her family hides priests. Bane is not a believer, but he is a member of the underground. And Margaret fails her tests. She is a reassignee. Bane swears to break her out of where they take her. And in this very bleak and hopeless world, there is so much hope, and there is so much faith, and there is this just beautiful trust in the Lord. I don't want to say too much. I will say there are 2 scenes in this book that are incredibly difficult to read. Incredibly difficult to read. However, if you decide to pick this up, as difficult as those 2 scenes are, it is worth the struggle to get through them, because the end result is an amazing story of not just faith, but of God's love for us, our love for our fellow man, and some incredibly mature 16-year-olds. And their selflessness is amazing. It is amazing. This is the first book in the series. There are 6 more books. It ends on a cliffhanger. I need to know, but it's going to be a while before I read the next one, because when I say the scenes were difficult, the scenes were difficult. Yeah. But if you like dystopian and you can read young adult and you enjoy a faith book, then go pick that book up. Honestly, it was fantastic. Okay. And then there was the unexpected gem of the week. That unexpected gem was Murder on the Bucket List by Elizabeth Perona. And this, I went to the library. I had to pull some books for the next great content debate video. And this was sitting right next to the books I was pulling. And it caught my attention because, honestly, look at the cover. Look at the cover. Those 5 little ladies. Yeah. Well, they're all in their 70s. And it was fantastic. I'm going to read you the back. The septuagenarian women of Summer Ridge Bridge Club have gathered in secret late one July night to check skinny dipping off their bucket list. But as Francine observes, the jittery members seem more obsessed with body issues and elaborate preparations than actually stripping down and getting in the pool. A pungent smell emanating from the pool shed provides a perfect distraction. When a dead body flops out, it's an answered prayer for Charlotte, since the first item on her list is to solve a murder. Unfortunately for Charlotte and Francine, before they can discover who really killed the man, they must negotiate neighborhood tours of the crime scene, press coverage of their skinny dipping, an angry homeowners association, a disastrous appearance on Good Morning America, media offers sought by a hungry publicist, and a clever killer. Y'all, I burst out laughing several times in this book. I will tell you straight up, the murder is discovered in the first chapter of the book, and y'all know that is a giant red flag for me and an auto DNF. I did not DNF this book. And I am so glad. This is the only book in the series my library has. There's currently 5 books. They are available on Kindle Unlimited, and I will be continuing. It is a father-daughter writing team, and this is a very well-crafted, funny, show me, don't tell me book with little old ladies I can so totally relate to, and it was just great. The idea of having a bucket list when you're 60 and trying to, check things off of it. And suddenly you're in your 70s and you realize you haven't really started, so you need to start working on your lists. It was great. It's set in Indiana, so it's not, set in our typical, metropolitan area. If you enjoy Indy cars or midget cars, that is the focus of this book. It was fantastic. It truly was. It had to be good if I didn't DNF it and a murder occurred in the first chapter. That is just an automatic DNF for me. And the fact that I didn't says a lot to me personally. I loved this book. I really did. If you just need a cozy, pick this up. It was great. It was just absolutely fantastic. It really, really, really was. Okay. That was the reading week I had. It was fabulous. I did start The Mercy of Gods by James S.A. Corey. This was a birthday gift from Chrissy. I read the first chapter, and based on the first chapter, I don't understand the bad reviews this is getting on Booktube, but I've only read the first chapter, so I need to read more. And I will be working on that this week. I am also reading The Divine Comedy by Dante. This is part of the 100 Days of Dante. It's canto a day. It is a great way to plow through. That is a very bad description. It is a great way to read what may otherwise be an incredibly daunting classic. And this way it is not. It's just a snippet, 3 times a week and you're good. So that really only leaves 2 books on my pile of possibilities for September. And I am reading an arc. I'm reading Candle and Crow by Kevin Hearn. This is the 3rd and final book in the trilogy of... Oh, I forgot the name of the trilogy. It's right here. It is a companion series to his Iron Druid series, which I absolutely loved. If you like urban fantasy that is funny and memorable, Iron Druid is definitely for you. So yeah, I will finish that this week. So that leaves The Yard by Alex Grecian. I really, really want to read this. So this is probably my next start. It's a little over 400 pages. Nope. Yeah, it's a little over 400 pages. I can do that. No big deal. And Live Not by Lies, which is nonfiction. And again, this isn't overly long. It's a matter of me sitting down and doing it. It's, less than 3. It's 214 pages. So there's no reason why I can't do that this week. And then I would actually have finished, other than Words of Radiance, my pile of possibilities with added books. So I'd be good with that. Okay. Did you guys read anything good last week? Am I missing something? Leave a comment down below, like and subscribe, and I will see you here next time at the Protagonist Pub.